Alright, well, the 2000 Frontier 4-wheel drive stick shift here. This is my little beater truck I picked up. And it was just a beater, but I got the heater core fixed, so there will be a video out on the channel for that, replacing the heater core. So now it's a beater with a heater. But the starter, after just a few tries of starting, I got it to fire up because it had a bad ECU. So I put an ECU out of a 2004 Xterra in it, and it fired right up. But drove it up to the store to get some gas, and boom, the starter's dead. So today we're going to be replacing out the little starter that goes to this guy. Now it sits, there's the starter right there. It's not very big, and it sits right inside of here. Now for the 2-wheel drive, there's not much in the way, but the 4-wheel drive has got all of the drive shafts up front and everything. So we're going to see if we can get this little guy out the bottom like we do for the 2-wheel drive by lifting it up. But step one of this whole deal is you have to be sure and disconnect the ground on your battery, because that terminal down there on the starter is live. It's got 12 volts, and if you put your screwdriver in there or you touch a wrench to the frame when you're taking that wire nut off of there on the starter, you're gonna be like Operation back in the day when I was a kid, and things are gonna be flying, sparks flying. So make sure you disconnect this negative, and I've already loosened it up. So you got to disconnect this guy, get him off there, get him out of the way so it cannot get back up on top of that terminal, and you're good to go. So we've killed the power. Now we can lift the little truck up a little bit further, and we can see if we can get up under here. And really it's just 2 bolts, and it's just the connector for the 12 volts coming down, and then a little wiring connector. So it's not a big deal if we can get it out the bottom. So let's get set up here and see if we can get this little guy took off, and then swap him out for our new one. Alright, so after you disconnect the battery, while we're on the side here before we lift it up, there's a little connector. This is the new one. So that little connector right there has to come off. And it's hiding with a little wire, runs right over here. So you can see, I can zoom down in here a little bit, and you can kind of see that the flashlight is shining on the solenoid. But the wire actually goes way over here, and it is right there. So what we gotta do, get our light to cooperate. So what we gotta do is reach in here and grab this terminal. We probably can't see it on the camera, but you just disconnect that little guy, and there he is. So that's the one that goes to our bad starter. So now, while we're over here, I'm going to get a wrench, and we're going to take the terminal wire loose also in the inside in there, and you'll see it only one has to come off. There's 2. One goes to the starter, the other one goes to the power wire. So let's get us a wrench and see if we can get that terminal loose. I think it's probably either a 10 or 12 millimeter, not sure yet, but we'll find out here in a second. And then we can lift the truck up, take the 2 bolts out, and hopefully drop this little starter out of here. Alright, so here is our little nut. Hopefully we can see in the camera right where my finger is right there. So you can reach it with a wrench and go this way and get the little guy out, or you can get an extension and a swivel and get it from the front there. And we've got a new nut, so we don't have to worry about losing that one. But once you get it loose, then you can reach in there and spin that little guy off with your finger, and he'll fall out on the floor. Then we can take the terminal loose. So there is the terminal loosened up, and that's what we got to put back on our new starter. So we got our 2 wires loose, we got the main terminal loose, and we got the little guy, he was loosened up before, so we got him off. So now we're ready to go to the bottom and see if we can unbolt the 2 bolts and then tip this little guy out of there. Alright, so down to the bottom. So if this wasn't a stick shift, we wouldn't have some stuff in the way, but right here is one of the bolts that holds the starter on. Right up here is the other bolt. So they're easy to get to, but our little slave cylinder right here is in the way because the pipe goes right back inside of that darkness there. You can see it come back around, and that's where theoretically this little starter is going to drop out and come out the bottom right here. So we got to get this guy out of the way. It's got a little bracket up there, so there's like a 12mm bolt that you have to take off, and you can take this bracket loose. Then we'll take these two off right here, and we'll pull all this out of the way, bend this little pipe a little bit, and then hopefully that'll free things up so we can take these two bolts out and then drop this guy down. So let's get all this slave cylinder stuff out of the way, and then maybe we got enough room to pull him out. So now the bracket's freed up back here. Pop it loose from here. Now we're just going to take the two bolts off for the slave and see if we can just slide it all out of the way. There we go. So now we got him out of the way, and you can see it'll push back in there when we get ready to put it back. So we'll just let him hang out right there. Hopefully it won't leak too much fluid out. So now that is free. So what we got to do is get it pulled this way slightly. Like I say, we just got to get where we can get inside of here. So we got him out of the way. So now we can take the two bolts loose and see if we can drop this thing down. So now I'm going to get me some gloves on, because now I got to handle this thing to get it out of there. It's liable to smack my fingers. So let's get us some gloves on, and then we'll take these two bolts out and see if we can drop this starter. Alright, so with some gloves on now, we can come in here and we can get these bolts loose. So we'll just use a swivel, and I already loosened them up, so they're pretty loose. This one up here, we got to do the same. See if I can get my swivel to cooperate. So we get them up in there. There. And we got to break him free. And there's not much room in there, so I highly doubt it's going to fall out. But if you're worried about it, you could reach up under here and hold the starter while you're taking these bolts out. They are the same length, so no issues with confusing them, because both bolts are the same length. So now, with our starter loose, we just have to slide him backward and try to tip him up over the top of the oil pan, or down, or somehow. Somehow that little guy's got to come out of there. And there we go. So it comes out kind of like that. And so when you're installing it, we're going to just pretend you just put it up in there with the solenoid that way and get it leaned up in there, and then tip it forward and put it back up in there. So not too bad, it actually does fit. So now let's take this thing over to the bench, and we're going to see what happened to our starter. And then we will reinstall our other one, because it sounds like something ain't right inside of there. So I'm thinking maybe it is toe up. But we'll have a look-see at that. Maybe I'll do that at the end of the video, and I'll go ahead and get this one reinstalled. That way we can get it all buttoned back up. So let me get the other one, and we'll get set up here, and we'll reinstall this guy, show how to do the bolts. The only two things you really got to do is mount it up in there and get the bolts, and then wiggle it as you're tightening the bolts up. And the rest of it's just reassembly. So let's get set up. We'll do that part here in just a second. Alright, so up here you can see that's where the starter goes. Inside you can see the flywheel gear, and it is quite nasty. So what we're going to do before we put our starter in is we're going to clean up that surface a little bit and just get everything cleaned up inside of there. So I'll spend a minute cleaning that up, make sure that little surface right there is nice and clean, and then we'll be able to reinstall our new starter. So we'll be back once we got that all cleaned up. Alright, so with our nasty little starter mounting surface cleaned up, it's time to throw our new starter back in there. So what we had was go in this direction, and so what we got to do is put him back up in there, get it up over the oil pan, and then tip it around like an so the solenoid is back forward, and then we got to get it up on the mount. Now we worked. We almost got it in there. I don't know if you can see with the camera, but it ends up twisting it around and you get it back oriented this way. Now we just got to raise it up and get the bolts lined up. So it's setting on its surface just a little bit. So let's see if I can get a bolt and hold it up in there and see if we can get a bolt to hit the mount. But I have got the bottom. So let's tighten him on up just a little bit. See if we got it or not. Feels like we got it. So now let's see if we can get the upper one in there. And there we go. So now our little starter is back up in there. All we got to do is hook up that little connector right there. Hook up our power and then put our clutch back in, and we'll be in good shape. So I'll get all that done, cleaned up, and then we will fire this thing up once we got it put all back together. So we'll be back in a minute to see how this new starter does. Alright, so with a new starter in and our old starter right here, and something happened to it, and I was going to take it apart and see what happened to it, but I think I figured it out, because inside of the bell housing right here, you can see, I can zoom in there close enough, you can see what it looks like. There is a chunk of metal that has some wire on it or whatever. I don't know what that deal is, but you can see there is a definite tooth mark in that crunched up piece of metal right there that probably spun around on the flywheel and got caught in the starter, and that ended it because it tore the bearings out of the starter or something. That's why the starter sounds like that. So no need to take it apart, because as you can see, whatever that is, and I don't know what it is, but I got to take the transmission off anyway, because third gear, the synchronizers are out. So right now I can shift first, second, fourth, fifth. Can't do third because you can't get it back out of it. And the rear main's leaking, so we'll have another video on pulling this transmission. I'm going to try to do a rebuild on the transmission, so I may show a video of that. And doing the rear main, so we'll know how to do all that for our little beater with a heater. So now, with all of that done, I'll take my gloves off and we'll hop up in here and we'll see if this little fella is going to start. Put it in and see if she goes. Starts like a new one right there.